Hi, how you doing? We're going to take a close look at the seedlings today, see what's doing well, what's not doing so well. My name is Sharon, and I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. So you've seen this before. This is my very old grow light stand, bought it in 1993. I like to comment on that because it's held up so well. It used to have fluorescent light fixtures, but we changed them out to LED tubes, and these are LED shop lights in there. Generally, I keep those shop lights, although they are 5,000 K and lots of lumens and everything. I bought one of these par meters to be able to check the lighting at the canopy of the plants, and this has told me how far I do need to be from the canopy of the plant or from the top of the plants to be able to determine how low those lights need to be. I was really good with the fluorescents. I used them for so many years and I knew exactly what I was doing, and that was very close to the plants. That also, the fluorescence also gave off heat, and so I use that as well for this cool room. I use that as well as almost like a heat source. The LEDs don't provide heat like that, these LED shop lights. You know, I also have LED grow lights in the other room, and they do provide a little bit more heat somehow. They're also stronger, and this has also told me that I can have them a little bit higher from the canopy of the plant as opposed to these. So there is a difference, not just in the color spectrum, but in the light intensity as well. So anyways, these fixtures come down very low over top of the plants, and I have raised them here just for access for today. Take a good look, probably give it a cleaning later, and then I lower them down again. And so we'll have a close look at everything. I'll bring stuff off and put them under I have that little overhead camera, and so I'll put them under that to get a good look at them. And I also have a few seedlings growing in the other room under the full spectrum lights. I'm going to show you those as well. As a matter of fact, we're going to start with those. So mostly what's growing under the other lights, or still trying to germinate in some cases, are all of the primrose or primula seeds that I started or tried to start. What I did with these was I seeded them, I believe it was mid-January or sometime in January, and then I put them in the fridge for 4 to 6 weeks. And then when I brought them out of the fridge, I put them just on the windowsill of this north-facing basement window, very cool but warmer than the fridge, and I let them sit there for about a week. Then I put them under lights. Initially, I put them under the grow light stand with the LED shop lights. They didn't do much. Then I put them on the heat for not long, maybe about a week, and some of them started to pop a little, and then I just landed up putting them in the other room. And so some of them have had good germination, some of them I'm still trying to germinate. And this one is the Primula Polyantha Violet Victorian. And I think this has had, not bad germination. There's certainly enough to try these. And so these are all started from seed, and I'm going to trial them for zone 3. I don't know if they're going to survive as perennial in this zone or not. So I thought I'd give them a whirl by seed. And this one is Primula media, or meadia, M-E-A-D-I-A. And there's been very nice germination in here too. I dropped one of these, and I think it was this one. I think it was this Polyantha Victorian, and it dropped, and it did get quite messy, so I kind of scooped the seed back in there, and it still has germinated quite fine. It's okay. Some of these still have the domes on because I am still trying to germinate or germinate more. All right, so this one is Primula nivalis, and I just want you to see, I think I'm going to just spray a little bit of water on that while while we're looking under here, so maybe it will show up just a little bit better. Right there, there's two teeny tiny little seedlings right there. The seed coat, the seed husk is still attached on there. And so those are new since I've checked them just a couple days ago. So maybe that is a sign that they are going to start to germinate. So I'm just going to put that lid back on. It's got high humidity. It is not, you know, overly warm in that other room. Andy gave me one of these. It's like a laser thermometer kind of thing. I can take the temperature of the soil surface is basically what it is. And so this is telling me that the soil surface of this pot is 22 degrees. I think that's a really good temperature for germinating primula. I recall I was given a little bit of instruction with the seeds when I received them. Also, these seeds were gifted to me from Botany CA, and I told her what I was going to be doing, that I wanted to trial them in zone 3, and she graciously gifted them to me. So again, I just want to spritz that a little, so because I see some little seedlings trying to pop through. I don't know that you're going to see them there, but there is a couple that are a little bit older. And this is Primula vulgaris. That's one of the more common primrose, and I thought I would have pretty good germination with that. But what it is showing me, what these all are showing me, is that they don't germinate at the same time at all. Some of them are taking longer, and some of them, you know, a little faster. And they're certainly not going to make big plants this year. Perhaps these Violet Victorians, because they are a little bit bigger, but what I'm expecting to do is to pot some of these up and really just continue to grow them as potted perennials for a while. Maybe I'd be able to plant them into the garden toward like late summer, maybe August or something like that. Then I have Primula japonica, and I have been keeping the dome on it, even though I've had a number of them germinate now. So these little domes have little vents at the top, and I just open those vents. I don't know how much that's helping to reduce the humidity. It looks like it is helping a little, comparing it to the others. But here we have, I think you should be able to see this pretty good, that there are quite a few seedlings in there. Very small. They're going to take some time. And then the last one is Primula Sibthorpii. And this one so far has this germinated over there. I don't know that that's a primula. It does look a little bit different. It could very well be something else as well. But I don't see any other germination in there. So if these don't germinate, I'm not going to throw them out. What I plan to do with any that have poor germination, and I think this is the one that is showing the least amount of germinating, you know, basically no sign except for that one, which as I said, I'm not sure that that's actually a primula. It just doesn't look like the right color or the right leaf shape or anything. So what I would plan to do with this is actually put it back into the fridge for a while for another cold treatment. It could be that it just needs that to break that seed coat. There's nothing that says those seeds have rotted away or anything like that. Some of them maybe do have a little bit more trouble germinating. So back in January, I started some foxglove seed. Not a lot germinated out of that batch. And then they must have all damped off. I don't know. It just was like slowly losing seedlings. You know, I'd look every day and there'd be a couple less, and eventually they just all kind of died off. So I seeded again on March 2nd, and I got a whole bunch of seedlings. And they are very slow growing. For such a big plant, they're really slow growing. But I do see now that they are putting on their second set of leaves. The soil surface here is just staying really damp. And what's going to happen after this dampness is it's going to form a crust. And I have been struggling with my ProMix this year. Back a couple months ago, I showed you my process of sifting the ProMix HP to turn it into a seedling mix. And the only reason I do that is because sometimes there's little bit bigger chunks of peat, and there's bigger chunks of vermiculite or of perlite. And so I just like to get that out. I've been doing that for a long time, has always worked fine. It usually works out pretty good, but I'll tell you, when I was doing that process, I also talked about how I was finding lots of chunks of wood in the ProMix, which I thought was really unusual. And so when I sifted today, again, I'm finding all of these chunks of wood. So ProMix HP is supposed to be peat moss and perlite. And the HP stands for high porosity, so there's a good amount of perlite in there. But I have never before found wood. What I would always find is things like this. Just sort of larger chunks of peat moss and this is actually fairly extreme. I've never really found anything that big. It would usually be about that size. So I don't know what's going on, but I have been having some trouble this year with some germinating, trouble that I've not had in previous years. One of those troubles is that crust forming when the top of the soil gets dry, and also that it holds that moisture and then just, seems to go dry. And that's what's going to happen with this. I can tell right away that this soil surface has formed a bit of a crust, and it's not a nice loose soil mix. It kind of packed down. I do think these are going to make it. I don't think they're going to damp off. It does concern me. Here's another example. So here you can see I've let these Dusty Miller. This is my first planting of Dusty Miller. I don't remember how many seeds there were in here. I'm going to say probably 50. So see, that soil surface has just crusted. Now, granted, it's dry, but Dusty Miller, I usually let it go dry because it is very drought tolerant and doesn't mind that. So that's all that has germinated, and I was disappointed with that, so I'm just going to wet it now to show you. Also I've been doing bottom watering with these. A little bit disappointed in that this year. So that's the first tray of Dusty Miller, and so I seeded the rest of the package on March 15th. A few more have germinated perhaps, and maybe a few more are still germinating. So it's probably a good thing that I kind of have decided that I don't need a lot of Dusty Miller. This is the new look Dusty Miller as well, because I'm just not going to have very many. Maybe I'll get between 18 and 24 plants, I think. I'll talk about some of the things that I sowed early, and these are Thalictrum, which is meadow rue. This was my own save seed, and I sowed these on January 14th, and I put them in the fridge. So that was the date that I sowed everything that was going into the fridge, the primula as well. And they have only just recently germinated. Now I guess I'm going to have to cut this off because I don't want to have that cover on there anymore. But they have only recently germinated, I'm going to say within the last maybe week. Not too bad. I did sow a lot of seed in there, so the germination is low. With the Thalictrum, I believe it needs to be very fresh seed to get the best germination. And these are the ones that self-sow out in my perennial beds quite easily. I have a number of them, and I don't generally pay attention, but I thought, well, I'll just give it a try, sowing some in a pot and then planting a few out. The other seed that I had that was my own was hosta seed. I thought it was last year, but it maybe could be older seed. Anyways, none have germinated for me. I don't think this is going to be viable at all. Thankfully, this was my own seed and not seed that I purchased. And I should probably, and I still have some of that seed, so I should probably toss that, and I'll toss this. I'm not going to try anymore. It was just an experiment, really, to see if they would germinate. I seeded cherry brandy rudbeckia on March 1st. And so I think there was like 15 seeds, if I'm not mistaken. It doesn't say on the package how many seeds there were. I think it was 15. Anyways, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have germinated. This one germinated only quite recently. They seem to be germinating just kind of sporadically. But so far, I mean, I'll be happy to have 5 seedlings, I guess. 5 plants to grow. They're looking okay. In the last video, I was talking about the dichondra and that I was trying to figure out how to take cuttings. Anyways, I left the plant in here so I could cut off that 3 feet of growth and cut it right back. I did that, and I just left it on the floor because I was cutting it off sort of in 6-inch increments. And after I was all done, there was some mess on the floor. I picked up all the trimmings and got rid of them, and then there was, you know, some residual mess that was left on the floor that I needed to sweep up. So I was down there sweeping up, you know, with just a dustpan and a little broom like this, and that's when I noticed all the seeds that came off. So I sowed them. There's nothing here yet. I looked it up. It said to surface sow them, which I've done. I did not put vermiculite on top, but I think I should, just to hold that moisture a little bit more. There was a little bit of chaff in there as well, but quite a number of seeds. I probably put 10 seeds into each of these little cells. They would have been fairly fresh seed, I imagine. They're bigger than I thought they would be. I should have looked, because I knew that there had been little flowers. The flowers are absolutely minuscule on the plant, and they're sort of almost at each node. There's this tiny, tiny little flower. So I assumed quite wrongly that because the flower is so tiny that the seed capsule would contain seed like pepper. That's really what I thought. I've never grown these from seed before. So when I found all of these little seed balls right there, you know, they're almost the size of, I don't know, like a radish or something. I was surprised that they were that big. So we'll see what they do. And the onion are doing great. This one, which is the Kelsey, is probably the only one that is somewhat crowded and one that I would have to worry about transplanting them. The others, though, like something like this, you know, it's not very crowded at all. Each of the stems have a fair amount of room to grow. Onions don't mind growing crowded. It doesn't seem to bother them too much. And because there isn't too many in there, the root structure won't be too tangled at the bottom. So I may leave those in those trays. Well, I'm going to leave them in there as long as I can because because of space again. Also, if the weather is decent, you know, these can get planted out by early May. And if the weather is really decent, they probably could get planted out even sooner. My onions are doing well. I keep them trimmed to about 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches like that. Some of you have been asking about fertilizing, when I fertilize and such. I fertilize the tiny seedlings, the newly germinated seedlings. I start to fertilize when they're pushing their first set of true leaves. I fertilize with a weak solution. It is Miracle Grow 24-8-16. According to the package directions, I mix it like for houseplants. That works pretty good for the majority of things. When I move things out to the greenhouse, then I will start fertilizing more at full strength. I think that by giving them too much nitrogen when they're too little just promotes fast weak growth, and so at the same time, you don't want to not give them anything. And so that's what I do. And it does seem to work. I usually don't have any trouble with it. And next we have Acerina, and it's a viney plant. I didn't know what to expect. I haven't grown these before, and so it was a new thing for me. But I think I got pretty good germination. 2 of the cells, this one and this one, did not germinate anything. I believe I put 2 or 3 seeds in each cell. So I do have enough to try them on that 4x4 post. I certainly don't need a lot of them. I really probably could get away with 6 or 8 plants, depending on how they grow. But I think they're doing okay. You know, they're starting to put out their second set of true leaves. And as well, if I look, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but down in the crook there, they're starting to push growth from there as well. And I think I'll be able to pinch these at some point when they get a little bit taller and just contain their growth and maybe make them a little bit bushier at the same time before they get planted out. Great. I have 4 of these trays of portulaca. They were pelleted seed. Each pellet is a multi-seed pellet. And out of those multi-seed pellets, some of them I got 1 germinate, and some of them I got 5 or 6 germinate. All of the trays germinated well. There was nothing wrong with that seed whatsoever. They germinated fast. The portulaca I seeded on March 9th, so it's been just getting on to 3 weeks now. I don't know. I think they're looking good. And then the peppers. I normally don't have trouble with germinating peppers, but I did have a little bit of issue this year. I want to grow 3 each of 5 different varieties, so I only seeded 5 each of the 5 different varieties. Fairly certain that I'd get 3 peppers out of them, but that didn't happen. The Olympus, which is one of my favorite varieties, has only germinated 2, and this one quite recently. And then on the other side, on this side, is Red Knight. And I have 3 good seedlings there. The next 2 varieties that I have are Jimmy Nardello. I planted 5 seed, only 2 germinated. And I planted Lesia, which is that Ukrainian heirloom sweet pepper. And I planted 5 seed and 4 beautiful peppers germinated. The Lesia seed came from Annapolis. The Jimmy Nardello was from West Coast. And the Red Knight and the Olympus, those came from William Dam. And King of the North, which had 3 of 5 germinate, they also came from West Coast seed. And so because I had that low germination, I decided to sow 3 more seeds of each, 3 more of the Jimmy Nardello, as well as 3 more of the Olympus. I sowed those on March 15th. So these are going back underneath these shop lights, and no heat, no dome, you know, all that comes off once everything is germinated, and they're just going to grow on, again, with the lights fairly close. I'm going to say the lights are probably within 3 inches of the tops of the plants. And then we have the strawberries. I've been growing Rowena strawberry from seed since middle of January. And, you know, they're doing pretty good. This is not a strawberry. This is a geranium. It was an extra. I didn't have room in a 6-pack for this one extra. And so I just stuck it in here because I had extra cells out of these 2. So I have 10 strawberries that are doing very nicely. Oh, that's the geranium. They are growing really, really nice. I grew strawberries from seed once before. They didn't grow this nicely. They were much smaller. They may have been an alpine or something like that, but these are Rowena. Package says they should produce fruit this year. We'll see. I'm not holding out hope for that, but you know, maybe, I don't know. From that tiny seed to have this type of plant already, I'm quite happy with that. They're in big 6 cells. And that's where I intend to keep them until they get planted into the garden. which hopefully should be early May. And then we have the purple bell vine, which are growing very well for me. I have a dozen jumbo 6 cells, and my hope was that they would grow in these until I get into the greenhouse, which shouldn't be too much longer. In each of these 6 cells, I have 1 or 2 plants. They were sowed directly into these 6 cells. I've not grown these before, so I really didn't know how they were going to grow. I have pinched a few. Basically, when they get this long stem coming out, I pinch that back, because if I look down below, I see lots of new growth wanting to push. So that's when I pinched. So as I see them, that's when I'll be pinching them. And I just do that with my fingers and just pinch out that growth stem right there. I think they're doing okay. Like I said, I wasn't really sure what to expect of them. I did think they would be more trouble. So yeah, nice roots on them for sure. And next we'll talk about the lavender. So back in mid-January, I seeded half a package of lavender and put it under lights and on heat. And then I seeded the other half into a tray and I put them into the fridge for cold stratification. The package directions I found to be confusing, so that's why I elected to do it that way. It wasn't definitive whether they should just be on heat and light or not or whatever. Anyways, and it was a package of 100 seed, and out of the first batch that I put on the heat mat and lights without cold stratification, I got 29 seedlings out of them. And then the second batch that I put into the fridge, then pulled them out. What happened after I pulled them out of the fridge was what germinated very fast, but I didn't get any more. I got about 30 seedlings out of that batch as well. Now, I didn't count exactly how many went into each tray. I judged, that about half went into one tray and half went into the other. They germinated fast. The germination rate was no better with cold stratification. It was an extra step that wasn't necessary. That's the size of them. And then my seedlings, which have about 6 weeks extra growth over the other ones, and they look really nice. I had some die back, and this is how they kind of died back. This one is still not looking too bad, but under there you can see that the soil is still damp, whereas on the others, I find it best to keep this quite dry. The others, it's definitely using the moisture. The surface is not wet, they're dry and growing nicely. They're enjoying that. But see, this one I think is just going to end up dying. And that's what happened to the other ones too that did die. And so some of these are growing really, really nice. They're pushing out these side shoots, lots of them. And when they start getting bigger, you could pinch this just to get this bushed out a lot more. But I think they're growing really nicely. So my notes tell me that I seeded all the lavender on January 15th. Half went into the fridge and half went onto heat and under lights. And then on January 28th, the ones under the heat and lights, they started to germinate. And by February 1st, about 20 of those lavender seedlings had germinated. And the seeds that went into the fridge for cold stratification stayed there until March 1st. And then once they got under the lights and onto the heat, because I did put them on the heat mat again, and they germinated very fast after that. I don't have it noted when they started to germinate, but it was very fast, and they all popped through really quick. That would be probably the only benefit that I see to the cold stratification. It didn't change the germination percentage at all. It seems to still be the same amount of seeds that germinated in either. So now I'm just going to wait a little bit longer for the next set of leaves. I do like 2 or 3 sets of true leaves before I transplant. These lavender seedlings, I transplanted them probably just a little bit bigger than this. They would have had about 3 sets of true leaves. I transplanted those on March 3rd, so just about 3 weeks or so now since these were transplanted. And yeah, I think they're growing well, except for those few. I think there was maybe 3 that died, and this one still, I think this one's been struggling for a while. It may also not make it, but otherwise I think the others should be fine. On March 1st, I seeded ivy leaf geraniums. They're called fancy pants. Geraniums grown from seed should be seeded earlier. If I had had the seed, I would have seeded them in January. But as it turned out, I had just bought the seed and seeded them pretty quick into this container. 20 seeds were in the package, about that. Of that, 4 germinated fairly quickly. Within here, there's 3 more now that have germinated. I think this one actually has just poked through. I'm waiting for these to get bigger before I transplant them. And these 4 I picked out of here gently and transplanted these 4. These are obviously sporadic in germination, and now that I've actually had to disturb some of that soil to pick those 4 large ones out, I might have lowered my germination rate even lower. I'm not sure. So far, that's 7 out of the 20 seeds. The reason that I wanted to plant these 4 separately was because I still have these on the heat and under a dome. So this is not the ideal way to seed something that has such sporadic germination. I wasn't expecting that type of sporadic germination, nor the fact that March 1st, it's 3 weeks later and I still have them germinating. So I guess that's, the way they're going to germinate. Anyways, I do have these 4, which are looking good. They're looking fine. And then another 3 that I just need to let grow on a little bit more before I try and get them out of there as well. And so again, these that I still want to germinate are on the heat mat and underneath the dome for humidity to help with that germination. And these that have been planted into their own little 6 cells are just underneath the lights with no heat mat or anything like that, just growing normally under the lights. So when this video airs, we're going to be about 8 weeks from last frost, even if you count your last frost to be a little bit earlier, or May long would be a little bit earlier. Anything that you have in that 6 to 8 week starting time frame, you should be starting by now. Anything in that 8 to 10 week time frame, you definitely should be starting that now. I started all my cabbage plants recently. You should be thinking about that pretty soon. The thing about cabbage is after they germinate, they can go outside pretty quick. If your day is just a couple degrees above 0, you can put these outside for the day and then bring them in again for the night. They do like to grow really cool. Growing cabbage in a warm environment, even in the 20s, it can lead to some leggy growth or floppy kind of seedlings. They do like to grow. Cabbage plants, that's cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, if you're growing kale, any of those, they do like to grow cool. They grow nice, sturdy, stocky plants when they grow cool. So again, I'm just sowing a few of each seed because I'm not growing tons of them. I seeded these on March 15th. This one is called Red Express, and it is that smaller early head red cabbage. This one is called Pixie, and that's a cabbage that it looks like it would fit in the palm of your hand. They're very small. These are the Tiara cabbage. This is my favorite cabbage to grow because it makes really excellent coleslaw. I don't do much with cabbage. I don't make cabbage roll leaves and I don't make sauerkraut. I really do like it mostly for fresh eating, for cabbage salad or for coleslaw. This Tiara is particularly good for that. For one reason is because it's very, very tender. I've seen it mentioned that it's called lettuce, like it's so tender that it's almost like a lettuce. It is very nice. It has a really nice flavor, not a strong biting flavor like some cabbages can have. Anyways, I had good germination on it. They're looking good, and they germinated fast within a week. And finally here I have a few broccoli. I only think I'm going to grow 4 or 5 plants. And this side I seeded nothing. It's empty and it's waiting for me to find a package of seed. You know, I talked about the kale seed at least twice in past videos, and I lost the package of seed. I have searched high and low for that seed and I cannot find it. So this stays empty until I can buy a new package of seed. So if you should happen to see my kale seed somewhere, you know, I'm probably going to find it like in the freezer or something like that, like some ridiculous place where I'd never put seed. So that's it. That's the update on the seedlings, how everything's doing at the end of March. They're doing okay. I'm happy with the results of it so far. Thanks very much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, give me a thumbs up, tell your friends, and hit that subscribe button. I do appreciate you taking the time today to watch this video, and I hope you're doing well. See you soon.